Hi everyone, this is Sarah from Mini Me Photography. This is an edit on newborn skin. A lot of people ask about getting creamy skin tone. There's a couple of things that I think are important to know before you go to edit your image. If you're wanting creamy skin tone, the best way to do that is to have two things. One is using a low f-stop. So I shoot all my images at f2.8. The higher your f-stop, the more detail you're bringing into your image. So especially if you're shooting, say, with studio lights at f11, you're going to end up with lots of marks on the baby's skin, inconsistencies in colour, and that's all down to the f-stop that you're using. The other thing that I use is portraiture, which helps to smooth the skin. So that's two things to consider before you do your editing to achieve that. The other thing is getting good white balance, and newborn skin is notorious for getting hard to get it right. So with white balance, I use the Kelvin method, and that's a setting in my camera where I'm telling my camera what the light is rather than letting the camera choose the lights, the white balance from the light that it's receiving through the sensor. You can also use Expo disc or a grey card to get your white balance, and it is much easier to get it right in camera than it is to be adjusting it in post. So if you're using raw images, you can adjust it in post much easier than you can if you just have a JPEG. So when you do editing, like this, this skin tone's actually okay, but I do quite a light, cooler edit on all my images. So what you can do is come up into your Adobe Camera Raw to this button here, which is your white balance tool, and click on that. So when you are doing white balance using this tool, you want to find an area in your image which has white. You can do it from grey or you can do it from black, but white is going to give you the best technical white balance. So by telling Photoshop that this part is white, it's going to set everything else based on that. So it can throw out skin tones by doing it. What I'm going to do is use my Flocati rug, which is not white, it's cream, but because I do a cooler edit, this is going to give me the colour that I want. So I'm going to click on the Flocati, and straight away it's taken out all that yellow in the image. The next thing that I'm going to do is come over to camera calibration up here. It's one of these tabs, and I'm going to change it from Adobe Standard to Camera Standard, and I'm using 2012 process. The next thing I want to do is come to Lens Corrections, click on that, and in Profile I want to change it to Enable Lens Profile Corrections. So it's pretty much, it's going to pick up what lens you've used, and you can change these from the drop down menu and pick what lens you've used when you're shooting. And then I'm going to come back to basic. I'm going to increase my exposure a little bit. I'm going to drop my highlights, and I'm going to increase my shadows just a touch. I don't do any sharpening or adjust clarity when doing newborns in the Adobe Camera Raw. So now I'm going to click on Open Image. And the first thing I want to do is, using my zoom tool, I want to zoom in, and I'm going to clean up the skin. So by coming up above your brush tool, I'm going to click and hold and go over to Spot Healing Brush. Now this uses content aware, so rather than having to clone, you can just do a spot heal, and it's going to choose an area around the selection you make to clone in for you. So you can click, or you can click and drag. So I'm just going to clean up all these wee spots of skin that she's got flaking off. Now when I want to do this around an area like her eyelid, what I need to do is zoom in, and I want to use a little spot healing brush, and I just want to click, I don't want to drag. Otherwise I'm going to distort her eyelid. So I'm just going to click without dragging and come down. Once I'm past that area, I can click and drag. And this is a really quick way of doing it. It's so much easier than cloning. Now on her chin line here, or her face line, I'm just going to do the same. Okay, now I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So when I get to bigger areas, first of all I'm just going to take out this piece of hair. And one here, one here. So when I get to bigger areas, I want to click down on my spot healing brush with my mouse, hold down my mouse and choose the patch tool. Now with patch tool we circle an area that we want to remove, and then inside that circle we click and drag to an area that we want to replace it with. And using our keyboard Command and D key at the same time, we're releasing our selection that we'd made. So I'm going to select around just a few of these marks. Whoops, I grabbed her leg then. I find this a really good way of doing bigger areas, and I use this quite a lot when I'm shooting on seamless paper and need to get out wrinkles. So I just make these selections, and I'm just trying to remove as much from the skin that are imperfections as I can. So once that's done, the next area I want to work on is this reflection on her face. So I'm just going to make a selection around that with my patch tool and click and drag over just to remove that reflection. So the next thing is skin tones. She has got this mark from birth on her eye, which is just due to her birth. It's not a permanent birthmark. So what I want to do is remove that redness. Now to do that, what I'm going to do is come over to my curves tool, click on curves. I want to click on this wee circle here, and then I want to use my black eyedropper tool here, double click, and I want to pick an area, a colour that I want to replace this red with. So I'm going to use her other eye and just click up here on her eyelid. I'm going to click OK, and then save the new target colours as default, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to click no, and then I want to click on the red. So that has changed our whole image. What we need to do now is come over to our layer mask and click on that, and then I want to go Command I with my keyboard, which is going to invert the mask. So I'm going to zoom in, and using my brush tool, these should be defaulted to white and black while we're on the mask. We need a white foreground, black background. If we had a white layer mask, we'd want to be painting with a black. So you can use this wee arrow to switch the colours over, but we're going to use white. Oops, click OK. And we just want a little brush, and we want our flow to be reduced right down. And we're just going to brush over this redness, which is going to help to tone it all in. And I'll zoom out so you can have a look at that. So that's before and after. So we can do that as well on the foot. Now every time that you do this for an area, you need to use your curves, this curves tool for each area that you're doing. So I need to go layer, flatten, and then repeat the process. Click on the wee circle, double click on the black eyedropper tool, and I'm going to use her leg as the sample. Click OK, choose no, and then I'm going to click on her foot. Click on my curves layer mask and invert it, and then using my brush I'm going to paint over her foot just to reduce that redness. And it's best to start at a low flow or low opacity and build it up. Okay, so that to me is fine. Now I'm going to go layer, flatten, and I use portraiture on all my images. This is a plugin for Photoshop, so it's something that you do need to buy additional. You go layer, duplicate layer, click OK, filter, and it's down here. And I run mine on high. You can choose between any of them, whatever you want to use. I'll just leave it on default and click OK. I never use it at full strength, regardless of what I choose. I always adjust the opacity. So with my background copy, I'm going to go new layer mask down here, and I want to zoom in, and then I'm going to use my brush tool on black because we're using a white layer mask. I'm going to reduce the size of my brush, increase my flow, and I'm going to remove it off of any of these feature areas, especially the eyes, the hair and the mouth. So that's just making sure that we're not reducing the sharpness of those areas. Zoom out again, and I'm going to reduce the opacity down to about 40% and then flatten. So the next thing that I would do in this image is clone in this part of the background that's missing. So I can do that by choosing my clone tool, making it a bit bigger. I want my flow at 100%, and I'm just using my selection from just below where I want to add it in, because this area being on the other side of her is already slightly out of focus. If I chose my selection from down here, which is more in focus, it's not matching the photo as to how it was shot. So using on my Mac, I'm using Option and then clicking on my mouse, which is telling me where I'm making my selection from, and I'm just going to add it in. Oops, what we should do is go layer, duplicate layer. We should always work on a background layer, always work on a new layer, or you have to use duplicate layer rather than new layer if you'd want to clone. But we should never work on the master copy, because if we make a mistake, we need to be able to just delete the layer that we've used rather than having to shut it and start again because we made a mistake. Okay, so that is nearly finished. I'm going to go layer, flatten, and then I'm going to do a levels adjustment. So I click on levels. If you haven't seen our levels video, this is the histogram of our image. So it's showing us on the right, this is our brightness and our whites. The left is dark and the contrast and shadows, and in the middle we have our midtones. So we have this peak, this hill within our levels layer, and it's showing us there's quite a lot of lightness in the image but not a lot of dark. So I want to click down on my contrast and drag it in to the bottom, and you can see how that's changing. The good thing is you can slide it backwards and forwards. I want to add a wee bit more depth to it, so I'm dragging that into where I feel it's fine. And then on the right here for our brightness, I want to drag this into the bottom of the mountain of this wee hill here, and I'm going to increase my mid-tones by going to the left. And I know it looks a lot lighter on the video than what it does on my screen, so I hope it doesn't look silly to you. Now I'm going to go layer, flatten, and this could now go to my client as it is, but it actually looks quite nice if it's tilted a bit. So what I'm going to do is use my crop tool, and I want to keep the ratio that I've got the image, which is a ratio of 2 to 3 or 3 to 2. So I'm going to choose 2 to 3, and I'm just going to switch those over. And what I want to do is, clicking on my mouse down here where we've got these angled arrows, I want to turn my image. And then I'm going to drag down to increase the size and click OK, there, arrow. Now I'm just going to go layer, duplicate layer, And I'm going to show you actually a couple of different ways you can do this. So one thing that we can do is we can clone in. So by choosing our selection, we can clone. And this is actually the easiest way to do it on this image. And I'm a pretty rough cloner, but what I will do at the end is create a bit of a blur so that we don't see how messy my cloning is. So we just clone it all in. It takes a bit of practice to get it right, and then once you've mastered it, you'll be away. So I'm just doing a really rough job so I can show you how I do it. Make sure you might be able to see these lines when you're editing. If I was cloning here and then edited up here, make sure that you remove all these because you will see them when you print them. And it's important that you clone from around the area that you are wanting to replace, because otherwise it's not going to blend with the rest of the image. So once I've done that, the next thing that I'm going to do is go layer, duplicate layer, click OK, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to pick that at about 20. Click OK. And then I'm going to add a layer mask and invert it, so Command I. And then using my brush tool, I've got a black mask, so I want a white brush. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Oops. And I'm going to paint on around the image, which is helping me to blend in those outside bad cloning areas. And then the other thing that I sometimes do is go layer, new fill layer, gradient, click OK. Now when I click on OK here, it's going to use whichever colour I have selected over here in my tools palette. So it's going to choose a white gradient fill, or not, because I've picked something else. If I go layer, flatten first, we can see that pink chosen there. So I'm going to click on the pink. I'm going to choose a colour down here and click OK. Layer, new fill layer, gradient, click OK. And I want to change it from linear to radial, reverse, and I'm going to reduce my scale down to about 150 and click OK. And then I'm going to reduce my opacity down, use my layer mask, and I want a black brush, and I'm going to remove that off her skin. And that is my image completed. I hope you could follow along with it and it wasn't too overwhelming, and I hope it all made sense. Thanks for watching.